Okay, welcome to the third installment of Legal AI Demo Day. The pace of development in technology is not slowing down, and our job is to help make sense of it all to be able to make decisions. The format is every Friday until the summer. We meet here at 11 a.m. Eastern Time to see several vendors, then have a conversation about it. The way we pick up, so a vendor have to apply. Those who didn't apply, we can't include, and then we choose a mixture of leaders in the field and some of the innovators to help you make decisions. We're very happy to partner with Legal Ops and Connie team to make sure that we have representation both of the law firms and the in-house, and very happy to partner with Legal Tech Hub and Nikki to help start the conversation. We have live demos, and then we have 4 minutes for live Q&A after each one of them. There are many more questions, so please write in all caps the name of the vendor you have questions, and they're going to answer some of these in the chat. The chat is not being recorded, only the conversation is, so it's not going to be reflected in the future. But please write the name of the vendors in all caps. There are 5 vendors presenting today, so for them to know who you're asking. We're going to post the recording of the demos and Nikki's session. We're not going to record the conversation that happens afterwards among the community when we ask the vendors to leave just the practitioners. Upcoming events on March 6th, we're going to have playbook generation demos. And then on March 11, we're going to get together for in-person hands-on workshop. And if you want to register to any of those, law firms and legal departments are invited to all our sessions for free. Please just go to skills.law. So today we're talking about timelines and chronologies. We serviced 130 law firms about what tools they use. And you could see the leaders on the slide. Nikki published something earlier today, and you could see the links to the Legal Tech Hub of each one of those products. Today's presenters are going to be Jigsaw, Wexler, Legora, Clio, and Cicero. And with that, I'm going to hand out to Claire Semple to introduce herself and the sessions.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Claire Semple. I'm Knowledge and Training Lead at Skadden London, and I'm delighted to be on this session today. We're going to hear from 5 vendors, as Oz said, which is a bit of a record for us. So we're going to be racing through. So it'd be super helpful if you can mention which vendor all your questions are for, and then I'll pull out some of those, but I suspect we'll only have time for a couple of questions for each. So we're going to kick off without further ado with Jigsaw.
Hi everyone, I'm Ollie from Jigsaw, and here to talk to you about how we can help create timelines or a visual series of events far quicker and easier than anything else you could use. Now, why do lawyers need timelines? Well, let me give you a few examples. The first here is a document, a kind of summary of Prince Harry or the Duke of Sussex against the newspapers. And what the lawyers will often be faced with is a long, lengthy document with lots of information in it and trying to understand exactly what happened when. Litigators in particular, it's critical to know whether accounts are corroborating each other or conflicting, whether what someone has told you actually maps out right against what the facts are, and presenting that back to a court or a client in a visually appealing way and one that's easily understandable, ultimately will determine the outcome of the case, or at least influence it. The more persuasive an argument is, particularly if it then includes visual elements which are persuasive, the better the outcome. So in this example, you can see there's a lot of information that a lawyer will have to pick through. And as we move through the document, you can see here under point 11 in the evidence, we talk about a series of dates already. So the 21st of November 2022, and then the 27th of January 2023. You can see in the next point under in 12, this is where Prince Harry was announcing he would be no longer a member of the working royal family, which all us Brits were really disappointed by. He ended up moving off to the US. But trying to understand this in this kind of lengthy Word document can be really difficult. So, mapping it out visually is incredibly important. On the transactional side, being able to explain to a client the key events in the deal that you're working on is also incredibly important. So you can see here, I have an Excel spreadsheet, and actually this is where a lot of the transactional lawyers will get to. Whereas the litigators, given the complexity of what they're working on, almost have no choice to build a timeline. The transactional lawyers, sometimes will say that this is good enough. And this would be sent to a client to explain to them what is happening. The one we are looking at here is, something like an IPO or a debt raising, for example, the key events that we're going to go through. And you can see the event names, the start dates, the end dates. The event type is in here, swim lanes. So swim lanes are often used to depict who is relevant to these events, who they're relevant to. And you can map these out just like this, but actually, if it wasn't in chronological order or there was more information in this, again, it would be really difficult to understand. So what does Jigsaw do? With Jigsaw, you can take these documents, these pieces of information, and visualize them automatically. So using AI, we go in and pick out the key dates, understand the language that talks about a couple of weeks. We can plot that as 2 weeks on a time axis and produce something visual without any manual work, so to speak. Of course, you can create these things from scratch. And rather than PowerPoint or Word or Visio, where it's a very manual drag and drop process, something as simple as just double clicking enables you to add events to a timeline and produce it very quickly. Some output examples. Here we have a business planning example. So we have the quarters along the top and the key milestones throughout. Here we have that transactional example, so an IPO with the critical months that are leading up to the public launch and the external and internal milestones represented in these swim lanes produced automatically. So you just take those lists of events that you already have and turn it into something that you could send to a client. The client probably prints this off, sticks it up on the wall. It's incredibly important to that transaction, and they'll use this as the place to go to understand as the deal progresses. On the litigation side, you can see here we're mapping out key events looking back in time. What happened when? I think this is in 2023 and 2024, so multiple years. And actually being able to depict the key moments and whether they line up or not. You might even map out the court process in the lead up to and then within the trial. What are the key things that we have to do? Within Jigsaw, you can actually add additional information to these timelines and make them dynamic. You can search and filter based on keywords or date ranges. You can even link events together so that when one event moves, it will trigger the other one to move too and maintain a gap of 30 days, let's say, to make sure you don't miss deadlines. Then when you're done, you can export this in a number of different formats, PDFs, pictures, PowerPoints, but also even to calendar events. So if you're starting to look into the future for project management, business planning, leading up to a transaction, what's going to happen in court, you can actually create these events as a timeline and then export them to your calendar so that you never miss something moving forwards. Hopefully that sparks a little bit of interest. Would love to talk to you more about that.
Thank you very much for that really clear presentation, Ollie. So we've got a question in already, which is, does this allow for branching?
So I'm guessing you mean branching as in you might have one timeline which then branches out into another one or two. So yes, the simple answer is yes, you can do that in Jigsaw. Quite a common occurrence, actually.
Okay, great. And when exporting these timelines, are there limitations on how they can be exported into other core legal tools such as PowerPoint or PDF for presenting at trial or in other formats?
Ollie, I think you've been working most on how we've exported this recently. You probably have a list.
Yeah, the answer is no, there aren't limitations on that. So all of the ones we mentioned in the video, PowerPoint, pictures, PDFs, however you may want to use it. And often a lot of lawyers will not even be exporting them. They'll be using them in Jigsaw as a presentation tool, almost using the filtering features we spoke about to zone in on certain date ranges and then come back out to a bigger picture. We've heard about these timelines being used in court to kind of persuade a judge or a jury.
Yeah, it almost becomes like a dynamic virtual whiteboard that you
Okay,
can
great.
manipulate.
And is there a limit to the length of document that the AI can work through to build up the chronology?
We've not faced any limitations, and we put very, very large documents through. Actually, parsing text is not really normally too much of a limitation. It's more about how the timeline is going to look. If you have 1,000 events on there, in which case that's where Jigsaw would be very handy, because you can zoom in, zoom out, you can filter so that you get rid of a bunch of the elements you're maybe not interested in at that moment. So you can just focus in on events that you are interested in, and you can choose date ranges, for instance. So you could actually put all the information in and then just filter out into individual bits that you'd like to look at.
Oh, that's good to know, because I was wondering how that works. So, but that makes perfect sense. And what about if you've got different members of a team collaborating and working on the document at the same time?
At the actual same time, Ollie, do you know if we have live collaboration, or if I'm not sure if the lawyers push back on that? Sometimes the lawyers don't really like multiple people working on their documents. They want one person to kind of hold the keys, and everybody can send comments to them, but someone needs to be accountable for changes that are made to the timeline because it's such an important document. Have you seen it any other way than that, Ollie?
No, exactly as you said, and actually it goes a little bit further, because when you're working multiple people at the same time with text, you can use features like track changes or comments to show where changes are being made. A diagram is visual already, so it's very difficult to actually see where changes have been made, particularly on a very large timeline. So having it check in, check out means you're always on top of what actually happened last.
You can share it, though, I believe, with others. So if you've been the
Yeah.
one working on it, you want to share permission for somebody else to then work on it, you can do that. So that's how
Yes,
I think the laws are working.
exactly.
Okay, great. That makes sense. And in terms of the kind of messy sources that lawyers sometimes working from, how accurately does Jigsaw convert those kind of into like legacy PDFs or hand-drawn sketches? How can those be drawn into the timeline?
So Jigsaw's actually quite good at, I mean, we've developed some image recognition technology where you can take previous PDFs of all sorts of different diagrams and import them, and have Jigsaw kind of, it actually uses a bit of like self-driving car technology in terms of trying to understand what it's seeing and then actually rebuilds that. So that's kind of how it works when you're looking at visual elements. But in terms of most of the time for timelines, people are creating lists, whether that's in Word, whether it's in Excel, whether they have a witness statement that they need to go through and pick out the important dates. It's often words that people are using to start with before creating a timeline. But you can work with an existing visual to get you started.
Great, thank you so much. Well, with that, we're at time. Thank you so much, team. And we'll now move on to Wexler.
Hi there, I'm Gregory Mostyn and this is Wexler. So consider a multi-party fraud claim, for example. Your client is alleged to have participated in a conspiracy to misrepresent asset valuations to investors over a 3-year period, let's say. Productions of key documents, run to over 80,000 documents. The information you need is scattered across board packs, valuation committee minutes, emails, between 6 different individuals. Text messages produced late. Some documents are privileged, others are in German, Chinese, Japanese. Certain information is buried in spreadsheets where the critical figure sits in cell B43 of a tab labeled backup, old. The plaintiffs say your client knew. Your client says they relied on external advisors. The external advisors say they flagged concerns. The documents don't support a single narrative because litigation never does. This is the chaos. Information's unclear, scattered across formats, or deliberately obscured. And that is the problem that Wexler is solving. So I'm going to very quickly show you how Wexler works. So I've got a matter which I've already created. It's about 235 documents which are trial exhibits in a opioid dispute between San Francisco and Walgreens. So when I upload these documents, I need to give it a steer. So what I need to do is, it's not a prompt. You'd have to become a prompt engineer to use Wexler, but you do need to brief it as if you're briefing a junior associate, as if you're briefing a colleague about what really matters. And this is the litmus test that Wexler uses to extract the facts from those documents. So to create this timeline, this narrative, we need to extract the relevant facts from documents. So we need to understand what matters, what's at stake in the case. Of course, you can generate details from the complaint, or you can fill out yourself because you know just what matters in this dispute. And so whether you're at the very genesis of the case, you're preparing for trial, depositions, or summary judgment briefing, or anywhere in between, you need to give it a steer as to what matters, that kind of context which governs which facts are relevant and which facts aren't. So I've got a summary. Everything, as is table stakes with generative AI tools in legal, is verified down to the original source. But crucially, what Wexler does is it pulls out these facts, i.e. the events mentioned within the documents. We're not just giving you a schedule of documents, we're actually pulling out the facts to build that timeline, that narrative. And so what can you do with these facts? Well, one of the things, of course, is you can create a timeline. But we don't just rely on an AI system as a chat interface to decide what's important in that timeline, because crucially, you don't know what's been left out. You don't know what else could have made it into the final output. And I'm sure when you've done manual chronologies, you know that that piece of information buried in that spreadsheet doesn't always come to the surface when you ask, an LLM to do that end to end. And so what you've got is you've got all of these facts which have been extracted from these documents, ordered chronologically, sourced back to where they came from. And then you can filter and slice up that information based on different characteristics. So let's filter to all the facts related to Walgreens. Let's filter to all the facts related to the issue of causation from that list of issues that I provided earlier. And so what I've now got is I've got 114 facts, which I can then bounce into a chronology. And so this is sort of taking a screenshot, if you like, of the underlying data and carved out what's relevant based on those issues, those characteristics, which I can filter. But you can also go to Kim, which is the chat interface, and you can ask it to summarize certain issues. And so it's given me this incredibly extensive, detailed, factual answer, which relies on the facts and the times and dates that have been assigned to those facts in that fact extraction process. What I can do is I don't just need to rely on this as an output. I can then bounce those sources into that existing chronology. And so using the different parts of the tool in complementary fashion to build up my understanding of the case, and I can even view it in visual formats. You can also look for where facts are disputed. We're not just taking each fact at face value. We can also see if someone said something and someone else said something else, and the sort of dates don't align, or there's some kind of factual discrepancy. That's in the inconsistencies tab, which is particularly useful, of course, for that depo prep. And something I didn't show you, but let's say you are preparing for a deposition, you can ask it to pull out key questions, and then you can bounce those sources back into a timeline. So I have a timeline of events. I have key questions to ask that witness. So in terms of the roadmap, what's ahead? The next thing we're building is this agentic version of the chat interface, which will allow you to do multi-step, multi-turn pieces of analysis. So pulling from an inconsistency, looking at the chronological sequence of events, building your chronology, and then going back to the facts table and considering where things don't add up. Increasing our scale. So Wexler can ingest 250,000 documents. That's over 2.5 million pages of data per upload, and you can query over that whole data set or within subsets, which essentially allows you to break down smaller walled gardens from the larger walled garden. And in terms of our pricing, well, it's credit-based pricing. So this is great because it means there's no cap on users. You can have as many users as you like, and the credits is based on the number of documents you upload, which is broken down into pages. Meaning you can also disperse to clients if you choose to. So that's Wexler. We're growing fast, working with some of the largest firms in the world, and just a very quick sneak peek into what we're doing.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Greg. And thank you for coming on to answer some questions. We've got some good questions in the chat. One of which was about how many documents it can handle at a time, which you've answered. But I suppose a follow-up to that would be like, how quickly does the tool then process that volume of documents?
Yeah, so hi everyone. I would say that it's basically used for relevant documents. So we're doing a case at the moment where the pre-call was 10 million. the relativity integration was used, and the postcall is 250,000. So it can ingest 250,000, but that is exceptional. That wouldn't be like everyday usage. I'd say the average is 5 to 10,000, but it can ingest that amount of relevant documents, hot docs, key docs. In terms of the time it takes to process, it does about 20,000 pages an hour. So 2.5 million pages takes several days to process. I'm sure people in the e-discovery world will appreciate that, but it's extracting every single word from every single document, compiling it against the other facts, looking for inconsistencies and so on. But it's not like you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs. You get a time estimate when it's complete, you get a notification and so on. For large uploads, you leave it overnight, but most usage, it'll be under an hour. So yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. And what does it integrate with Relativity and the other doc review platforms? Okay.
Integrate with Relativity, yes. Other doc review platforms, not yet. So we have a native integration to Rel 1. You can ingest documents, you can bring over the metadata, you can use the subset feature that I very briefly showed there to batch out by issue code, for example. So yeah, that's we also have integrations to OneDrive, SharePoint, Dropbox, Box, and hopefully more on the we'll be able to announce soon.
And final question, because we're at 1 minute. Can you review for bias or other sentiment? Interesting question.
So like that's not an out of the box workflow, but the key thing that Wexler does that I think differentiates us is the way we rationalize and elucidate the messy litigation data you were talking about in your first question, and bring that into sort of structured format that the LLMs can reason over really well. So, as I said in my kind of intro spiel, that means that it can pick out patterns, trends, bias, other sentiment a lot better than just chucking all the documents into a context window and saying, hey, answer for X. So that's not an out-of-the-box workflow, but you can certainly use the chat interface to query it for those kinds of things. And we've had really good feedback for sentiment analysis because of the way that we break documents down and pull them out into facts. So there you go.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Greg. And with that, we're out of time for this slot. And next up, we've got Ishmeet from Legora.
Let's say you've just been handed a new matter. You've received a demand letter, a shareholder agreement, text message exchanges, and a couple of side letters. You need to get oriented fast and build a clear timeline of events. I'll start in Legora's assistant and attach the demand letter and the 4 documents. I'll then add my prompt. I'm essentially asking Legora to create a detailed timeline of all key events in chronological order, including dates, what happened, and which document it came from. And just like that, Legora reads across all 4 documents and produces a structured chronology. For a small document set, this is the fastest way to get a first pass timeline. Every response includes a reference bubble. If I click into one, it'll take me directly to the underlying document and highlight the exact passage it relies on. That makes verification and cross-checking seamless. This is perfect for early stage case orientation and timeline chronology building. But matters rarely stay small. Once you're dealing with hundreds and thousands of documents, you need something more structured. That's where Legora's tabular review comes in. I'm going to go and create a tabular review and upload my documents. Here I've selected 181 documents and added them to my tabular review. Instead of reviewing these documents one by one, I can define structured columns for Legora to extract key information from each document. For example, label it name. Format this however I like. I'll retain the text format and add my prompt. I can also have AI generate my prompt. I can also edit this prompt and run it by clicking outside this box. Legora will essentially apply that prompt on all the documents and extract that relevant information. I can continue adding columns, but I don't also have to start from scratch. I can use a pre-built template designed for chronologies by selecting templates, selecting use template, and using this chronology and dramatis template that I have here, and select use. I'm essentially applying this template across all the documents, and Legora will go and extract structured information from every document and build a sortable dataset. We also have the date column right here. By clicking on these 3 dots, I can select sort and I can sort this A to Z. I can instantly view events in a chronological order. I can also scan across the entire matter in one structured view. This isn't just a timeline anymore. It becomes a live evidence repository. The real power is that this isn't limited to chronology building. For example, I can add a column, label this bribery allegations, format this yes or no, and then run that prompt. Licora will evaluate each document and populate that column either with a yes or no response. By selecting these three dots, can select filter and filter this by selecting yes. This narrows my review instantly, focusing only on risk relevant material. This becomes dynamic, filterable evidence database. I can click into any of these cells and also see Licora's reasoning. I can click into any of these reference numbers and it'll take me to the highlighted portion of the underlying document where it's got its answer from. And it gets better. I can chat by clicking on this chat option with this tabular review. For example, I can give it a prompt to create a timeline tracing Michael Shell's involvement in this matter. Licora doesn't reread the raw documents. It leverages the structured data we've already extracted. Now Licora generates a target chronology focused solely on Michael Chen. And again, every statement links back to the specific extracted cell it relied on. This means no black box reasoning, every insight is traceable, verification is immediate. And importantly, this isn't a static document you export and forget. It's a living data set you continue to interrogate as the case evolves. Now let's take this further. I'm going to rename this tabular review, calling it Chronology and Analysis. Returning to the assistant, I can continue to analyze the tabular review and compare all the information that we have there against any case matter documents, for example, deposition transcripts or any pleadings. Here, I'm going to tag the tabular review that we just created and add my prompt. Here, I'm asking Licora to compare the deposition transcript, which I'll mention here, against the Chronology and Analysis tabular review that we created and draft targeted cross-examination questions, and I'll send that out. Licora now cross-references the structured chronology, compares it against witness testimony, identifies inconsistencies, drafts targeted questions. Each question links back either to the transcript or to the exact cell in the tabular review where it's got that information from. You move from document chaos to strategic questioning in minutes. Finally, there's the library. If you have up to 100 documents and simply need a structured chronology quickly, you can run the chronology workflow. No prompt engineering required. You attach the documents and run the workflow. Licora builds a structured tabular review, extracts key event data, and produces a fully structured chronology. Each event is linked back to the extracted cells. Think of this as the middle ground. The assistant is perfect for small sets. Tabular review gives you full analytical control. The workflow handles the heavy lifting when you have a larger batch and just need the timeline built quickly. I hope you found this helpful. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you very much for that, Ishmeet. So we've got our first question in, which is, does the tabular review pull out all the metadata information automatically rather than having to create specific prompts for each metadata field?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. No, you'll have to create specific prompts, but what you can do with Licora is there is the assistant chat, which I showed you in the video. If you do actually just prompt it, saying that I want to create a column and I want all of this information, it'll automatically create those prompts for you rather than you having to individually create columns or having to rely on a template. So it is quite agentic in that sense.
What's the kind of collaboration functionality to like repeat my question about that?
No, the collaboration is actually one of the stronger aspects about Licora. You can actually share that tabular review with everyone in your project space. So whoever has access to that project that you would have invited to will be able to work on that tabular review with you in real time. It can leave comments for you, can flag them high, medium, low. You'll be able to track the status of the review and see exactly who's reviewed what, if any comments have been left, if any cells have been edited, you can lock the cells as well. So there's a high degree of collaboration and great auditability and traceability within tabular review, and you can work on in real time as well. So that also makes it really good.
Great. Once you've built your chronology or timeline, is there a way that you can set that up so that it updates automatically when certain events change and things move along, or how does that work?
So if you've got if you've got your timeline and already set up and you want to add new documents, you will have to add them additionally, and the prompts will run on them again. Or what I would like to suggest is creating a new Tableau review with the new documents that you've received, running new prompts. And then what you can do with the main assistant is actually tag those two Tableau reviews together and have the main assistant compare that. So how we showed the deposition transcript and the Tableau review in the main assistant, you can actually have two Tableau reviews also being compared. So that can be a great way to see, okay, fine, this was the old Tableau review with old set of documents, and now you've got a new Tableau review with new set of documents. How have things evolved and changed? And it'll do a great analysis and again take you back to the very cell so you can see exactly where the information's come from.
Okay, got you. And I've got a question. How do you suggest balancing cost with timeliness as new information becomes available? That sounds tricky to me, but yeah.
That's a good question. I think if you've got templates, so let me say about at least timeliness. If you've got templates, so what I like Legora's library is that you can actually create something that you like, works, and you're going to get new information, and this is information that you're going to constantly want to run. You create that and save that in your library of templates. So having to, instead of constantly prompt or figure out whether it works or it doesn't work, you leverage that library that you either have created for yourself or with your other team members, and then you are able to then at least be able to jump on, across the first hurdle, which is the timeliness aspect of it, saving a lot of time. You don't have to worry about prompting. You don't have to worry about whether this works or it doesn't work. Again, with cost, I think I was speaking to someone and said, stage. So I'm a former litigator, and I spent 8 years in disputes before having moved through this side of the world. And I remember phase 2 and level 2 reviews and key hot doc review taking up enormous amount of time, and that is a huge cost aspect which people try and outsource to other vendors, but you'd rather always want to keep it in-house if you can, because you as lawyers have more knowledge of the actual fact pattern and what's going on. So I think if you're able to leverage all the things that tools sort of offer, which is in terms of the library, the agentic capabilities, I think you can sort of somehow balance the two. But I don't know if it's an answer. It's something that answers your question, Bill, but I hope it does.
Okay, great. Thank you. That is helpful. Is litigation where you see the main use of it, or can it be adapted to kind of like different practice groups' needs?
I mean, absolutely. I think Tableau Review came about because there was a need with the M&A lawyers trying to review a bunch of documents and figuring out, so that's how Tableau Review was born. How can we review a lot of documents and contracts in a due diligence exercise? And it's so funny because when I looked at the Tableau Review, I know it was birthed out of an M&A deal, but I looked at it as a disputes lawyer and I said, this is fantastic for a disputes lawyer. And one of the things I know we struggle with quite a bit as well as a disputes lawyer is also scoping a matter, figuring out, what date ranges are important, what custodians are important, what Boolean search terms we should be applying. Tableau Review can help you with that. So M&A deals, in-house lawyers, disputes lawyers, transactional lawyers, all sort of seeing the benefit of the Tableau Review. So I'd say it's across teams. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for that. So without further ado, we're going to move on to apologies, to Vincent by Clio with Damien.
Thanks for having us, Team Skills. We'll bypass the pleasantries and jump straight into how Vincent by Clio uses AI to fit timelines and law into legal practice. Everything a lawyer does is a workflow, whether it's analyzing a contract, analyzing a complaint, and of course, analyzing a timeline, creating a timeline of who did what when is of course one workflow of many workflows. But the real question is it a workflow in and of itself, or is it just a component of other workflows? So let's start by creating a timeline. I, as a user, can be able to upload any document, either as a single document or an entire folder. And the types of documents we can pull in include things like Word documents, emails, PDFs. There's a myriad ways, myriad types of files that you can be able to pull in. Here, I'm going to select a collection. I've already uploaded a whole bunch of documents that I want to be able to analyze who did what when. In this case, from a Twitter versus Elon Musk lawsuit. So I'm going to select 11 cases, 11 documents, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then I'm going to add those 11 documents. And Vincent is going to start analyzing that to see who did what when for those 11 documents. And while it's doing that, I'm going to go on to my next workflow, because I might want to know a timeline of that group of documents, or I might want to upload a complaint. In this case, I'm going to upload Elon versus Sam Altman. This is going to trial in March. So you can see here that once you upload the PDF, Vincent is smart enough to say, oh, that's a complaint against OpenAI and its founders. And Vincent is smart enough to give you these buttons, no prompting necessary. Now, timeline is just one of the buttons, but you could also say, what are the claims being alleged? What are they looking for? Money, or are they looking for an injunction? Who are the parties? What are legal defenses to be mounted? What questions should I ask my client to help them win? Timeline is just one of the buttons of this. And query whether our competitors are able to tell you what is the organizational structure of OpenAI, and what are the elements of promissory estoppel using yesterday's case, yesterday's statute, yesterday's regulation? What are the fiduciary duties under the law? What is unfair competition law scope under California's unfair competition law? How many of our competitors can provide you with the timeline and the legal research all in one fell swoop? So I'm going to spin this one up, where I spin this up, and while it's working on that, I'm going to go to a third, analyzing a contract. And here I could be able to, again, select from a collection or a file upload. Here I'm going to do a merger agreement. So Vincent is now looking and saying, okay, this is a long merger agreement. It's about a 300-page merger agreement. So it's recognized, oh, that's a merger agreement between Microsoft and LinkedIn. And then as a result, it said, based on that, I'm giving you different buttons than we gave you for the complaint. And these different buttons reflect what contract lawyers care about. Because contract lawyers, yes, you care about the timeline of who did what when, timeline of key events, but that's just one of the things you care about. You also care about overlapping definitions and how do I mitigate risk and client hostile language, post-closing obligations. I want to do all of these things. That timeline is just one of the aspects. And of course, legal research, a lot of contract lawyers don't think that they need legal research. But if you get it for free, to be able to say, what are the merger requirements for in Delaware? And maybe I want to figure out whether Microsoft and LinkedIn will pass antitrust scrutiny. What if we want to do all of these things? Here are the 11 files, and here are who did what when. I can be able to expand this and be able to say who did what when. Here is the date. Here's the event that happened, and here's a verbatim excerpt. And part of that verbatim excerpt, I can be able to validate that verbatim excerpt as part of the PDFs that you see here. So trust but verify is baked in to everything that we do within Vincent, where you could be able to quickly trust but verify the particular portion of the PDF from which Vincent pulls its information. That is just one of the workflows. But now let's go to the complaint that I did. So we do, of course, have the timeline here. So if I want to be able to go to that portion of the timeline, I can be able to say who did what when. So here is the complaint as far as who did what when in this, along with the event and the passage. And I can go to the particular portion of the complaint from which Vincent pulled. Trust but verify is baked in. And again, you can download this wherever you'd like. So we give you also really substantive legal arguments, talking about breach of contract and saying that there was no enforceable contract because there was lack of definiteness and mutual assent. These are backed by actual non-hallucinated cases, statutes, and regulations. So yes, timeline does matter to a complaint, but that's just one feature of many. And of course, with a contract, the same idea. You do have the timelines of who did what when, along with the ability to be able to go directly to the PDF. But you can see here, it's not only the timelines, but it also has relative timelines as soon as practicable. So everything a lawyer does is a workflow. And of course, being able to create a timeline is just one workflow in and of itself, if you'd like. But a timeline can really be a component of all sorts of workflows. And the real question is, do our competitors have yesterday's case, yesterday's statute, and yesterday's regulation to be able to apply the facts to the law in the way that complaints matter, in the way that contracts matter, as to yesterday's antitrust case that matters to the use contract? So yes, timelines matter, but maybe as a component to the rest of the law. and query how many of our competitors have the rest of the law. Thank you.
Everybody knows that the chronology is the backbone of a case. In many matters, chronologies are done late, done badly, or not done at all. This means teams work without full information for longer than necessary, and strategy is built on instinct rather than evidence. That is the problem we built Cicero's chronology to solve. Let's log in and take a look. Cicero is matter-centric. When we create a new matter, it will ask us for contextual documents. If this is a pre-litigated matter, this might be a letter of demand or early correspondence that can be used to build a memo to instruct Cicero on what's going on. If it's a litigated matter, we can even start from the pleadings. In this case, we're going to look at Purdue Pharma. Now we've uploaded here the complaint and the answer, and we've been invited to import contextual documents from iManage, from Relativity, or from a local drive. We're going to skip that for the moment and go straight to one that we've pre-prepared earlier. But what has happened here is from that corpus, Cicero has extracted what we call propositions. To understand how a proposition works, Cicero contextually enriches every document it receives. For example, if we have an affidavit, and on page 1 it says, "My name is Joseph Raymond, and I was born in 1990. On page 2, it says, "At the age of 16, I attended the Australian National University to study arts law." If we looked at page 2 alone, without page 1, we wouldn't know who was talking, the milestone dates, or what year it was when they were 16. We'd have blanks, variables. If we were extracting dates from that page alone, they would be relatively useless. We contextually enrich every page. Once we've done that, we extract what we call propositions. A proposition is an atomic statement capturing who said what, about whom, when they were talking, when it was authored, and how it was delivered. Was it a contemporaneous statement, retroactive, or prospective? Was this a first-hand account, or was it second-hand? We can see the temporality and, based on the context of the statement, decide if it's an assertion, a legal allegation from pleadings that may not belong in a chronology, an expert opinion, or objective documentary evidence. These are dimensions we capture in our timelines, and we can filter on them to make it easy to find exactly what we need. The reason we showed you the pleadings is that we extract from them every allegation. It shows the position of each party, and you can look at this to see exactly what each party said about each allegation. Whenever an allegation is denied, we update our issue register to show it as a potential issue. These are the allegations that drive that particular issue being created. This is very much take or leave it. Sometimes lawyers upload their own issues, sometimes they use the ones AI generates for them. The important part is that if we go back to our timeline, we can filter these events by those issues. The main complaint about early versions of Cicero's chronology was that there was too much reading. Here, we see nearly 20,000 propositions generated from about 500 documents. A lot to read and sometimes faster to read the original material. But if we can filter for or against the key allegations or issues, instead of starting off in 1892 with the incorporation of Purdue Pharma, we can focus directly on paragraph 46, beginning on or about December 12, 1995, where certain Purdue supervisors and employees, intending to defraud or mislead, marketed and promoted OxyContin as less addictive. If we click on that, we're taken from the 19th century straight to the lead up to 1995, and within a few rows, we're at the heart of what we want to investigate. For every row in Cicero, for every proposition, we expect you to be able to validate it. It highlights the source on the page. You can add comments and you can agree, reject, or exclude the particular row. Up here, we can use filters to see only the ones we've validated, those pending review, or the ones we've starred for special attention later. We can view this in card view as you see here, or choose which columns to include or exclude. Once we've finished filtering a row, we can also filter by which documents to include. We know information comes in tranches. Sometimes we want to see a view by certain custodians, or based on what was provided after a discovery order versus before. This is a very useful way to work out who knew what, when. When we finish applying filters, including reviewing the value of the evidence, the relevance of the propositions to the facts and issues, the reference dates, and the dates authored, it also shows us the extracted entities. So if we want to see a timeline table relating to everything authored by Richard Sackler, the president and CEO of Purdue Pharma, we can do that easily. Once we're done, we can save those views for later, for sharing internally or for personal use, and export them to Word or Excel. We offer 2 pricing models. The first, popular with firms, gives you 10,000 free documents per matter. If you pay per user, you get unlimited matters. And for the 10,001st document, there's an overage charge. The second option is unlimited users, but pay per document, which is popular with ALSP users assisting firms regularly. If any of this is of interest, we'd be happy to take you through it in more detail. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much for that, Joe. I had a question to kick off, which is how the contextual system deals with ambiguous time references in building the chronology.
Yeah, really good question. So against every single one of the documents, against every one of the propositions, we're capturing the level of confidence that we have as to whether whether it was an exact explicit reference to a specific date or whether it was inferred, like you saw a reference to the birthday and a reference to a relative age of someone attending university. If it was an inferred date, it would show up in a yellow line with a big sort of caption saying this has been inferred, whereas it's a solid black line if it's an exact reference.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. And how does the timelines link through to the DMS, and how does that work? What does that look like, that linking?
So it's 2 ways. The very first one is when you're extracting data from your look, we deal with litigation of all sizes. We often find that in high volume work, you're often using a DMS like I manage. In complex litigation, it's going to be coming from a relativity or a UX. It's a 2-way sync. So from any work products that get produced in Cicero can be pushed back into document management systems. Perhaps interestingly enough, when it comes to our relativity and UX integrations, we can push back we create tags against not just the propositions, but also the documents themselves as to which ones were responsive to various different issues that were contextualized from the various different documents that you've added to set the scene. Those tags can be pushed back into your review platform. So if you wanted to perform automated issue tagging, for instance, that's something that can be done by Cicero, saying that these particular rows were responsive to these particular questions.
Okay, great. That's really helpful to know. And question to you as to some of the previous presenters about the timing for the ingestion of large document sets and for the processing of those document sets.
Seems like 250,000 is a magic number. That's also our upper limit at the moment. Our roadmap is we're looking to make that 1 million documents within by June. That's what we're all working towards. And when it comes to the time it takes, it's actually very quick. So one of the sort of big differences between us and many of the other platforms that you've heard from today is that we don't use OpenAI or Anthropic upstream. We are hosting the models in infrastructure clusters within Australia, US, and UK, depending on which region you're in. So we're privately hosting the compute, and it's a Mistral model behind the scenes, a non-reasoning model. The reason why that's useful and interesting is because but when you're owning the compute itself, you can move a lot. You can process the information a lot faster. We're maxing out the entire cluster. To put something in reference here, McKinsey used 200 billion tokens worth of data last year. They got it from OpenAI. They got an award for it. We use 200 billion tokens a month just off the clients that we've got at the moment. And so it allows us to perform truly exhaustive extraction jobs from very, very large corpuses. And so if depending on whether it needs OCRing or not, we'll do a search. If it needs OCRing, we can deal with 20,000 documents per hour. If it doesn't need OCRing, that can be up to 100,000 documents per hour.
Okay, wow. And for exporting to present a trial, I guess I'm thinking of what are the export capabilities?
Yep. So we don't have any nice visualizations as such. We've got Excel or Word, but you can choose which columns you'd like to include in either of those particular formats. We capture a lot of information behind the scenes. Is it not just the proposition itself and who said it, but how did they say it? What was that, a first-hand or a second-hand account? Was it something that was said at the time of the event? Was it something that was said at the prospectively as an event that might happen in the future? Was it something that was said retrospectively, potentially in a self-serving fashion? So you can choose to capture which attributes are important.
Okay, great. And question to you also, as to others, about the ability for lawyers to collaborate, or the controls on collaboration, depending on what people are after.
So there's two options. You can save a chronology as a personal view, which is for just your interaction, or alternatively, you can choose to collaborate with folks. And the idea is we often have document review teams. We're sort of interesting in that we have a lot of e-discovery teams as well as litigators using Cicero. We're seeing some document review teams are collaborating on. We'll sometimes assign out various different document sections to review as part of that chronology. So we collaborate. It was built to collaborate.
Okay, great to know. I think that's like, I don't think there are any other questions that have come in at the moment. So thank you so much for that super clear explanation and great answers to questions as well. Big thank you to all of our presenters and for the great questions from the audience. And now we're going to just ask that our vendors please leave, and we're going to discuss internally the great presentations we just saw. And while we're doing that, Nikki Shaver from Legal Tech Hub is going to set the stage for us for this use case and provide some guidance on digesting it. So we'll end the recording after Nikki's presentation, just so that you know that, and before our discussion. So thank you, with big thanks to Nikki. I will hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Claire, and hi everyone. And I also just want to commend our vendors and providers as they're leaving. I think it is quite astonishing that we were able to get through all 5 of them within the hour. So that was terrific, really informative. If we can move on, thank you, Stephanie. As Oz mentioned, timelines and chronologies is one of the areas that we surveyed this year and also last year. So as you know, 130 firms responded. So you're seeing really good data here. And you can clearly see what is in use versus the orange, what is in pilot, and the green, what firms are considering. In other words, where they might jump next. So it's a good kind of living portrait of the market. And it shows, the solutions with clear traction. It also indicates a broad and still fragmented field. It means we are still seeing active evaluation cycles here, with firms still determining which product architecture best fits the workflow. I think it's notable here we're seeing the presence of Jigsaw in second position to Harvey, and new entries from last year from Opus 2 and Clearbrief, which indicates that although many firms are comfortable to use broad AI solutions for timelines, a number of others are willing to invest in point solutions that focus on deeper purpose-built litigation technology for chronology development. It also probably explains the prevalence of litigation-focused tools like Wexler and Disco Case Builder in the long tail of the category. If we could move on to the next slide. We can also look at some of the data against responses from last year, which gives us a really clear indication of growth. So here, blue is last year and orange is this year. So again, it shows where the market is headed, where we're seeing a lot of momentum. And I will again say that this doesn't represent all vendors, partly because some of those are brand new this year in the data. And that's quite notable to see Clearbrief, for example, and how much they've jumped up in this particular category. If we can move to slide 3. I think what's really critical with this category in particular, and sorry if this is kind of small writing, this is going to be distributed, I believe, to you so that you'll be able to access it afterwards. But I think it's important here to recognize that we're not really seeing a split necessarily across similar solutions, unlike some of the other use cases we're looking at where there will be great consistency in how the use case is developed or approached by the technology. Here you're seeing more of a deeper structural divide in both how firms approach this use case and how the technology approaches it as a workflow. So, of course, in litigation heavy environments, timelines aren't a one-off output. It's not something that you just quickly develop once and you look at it and that's it. It can become really a system of record, a living organic system of record that is continuously updated as new documents are reviewed. I personally, I'm sure many of you remember having paper chronologies or chronologies in Word where you painstakingly had to, change the numbering and add new documents in and so on. It's updated as documents are reviewed, as witness testimony evolves, case strategy shifts, et cetera, et cetera. And in those contexts, chronologies really function as the central organizing layer of a matter, which means it's critical. Each fact is tied to underlying evidence, metadata, and often multiple interpretations over time. And that, of course, creates requirements that extend beyond just generation of a timeline. It includes the necessity for traceability and version control and the ability to link evidence, which we did see in some of the solutions today, and collaborative updating. So purpose-built chronology and litigation management tools, like some of the ones we saw today, including Wexler and Cicero, but also including others in the market like Clearbrief and GoodFact and Married Technology, are designed to handle exactly that kind of complexity, including the ability to anchor facts to source documents and maintain defensible audit trails and so on. So for firms where litigation, investigations, or disputes form a core part of practice, those capabilities are really important. And on the other hand, firms with perhaps less intensive litigation demands or where chronologies are used more as synthesis tools or an insight engine rather than formal work product, the general purpose AI tools there that have developed this as a functionality and are able to quickly develop timelines that are useful in order to see at a glance what has happened can be really helpful. So move on to slide 4. And so that means here, when you are selecting a solution for this use case, you really need to think about what is the specific job you're trying to get done or that your lawyers need to get done in the context of this particular area. What's the specific problem you're solving for? What's the pain point you're addressing? And as in many use cases at the moment, we're seeing firms invest both broad and narrow. And so it just adds a little bit of complexity around solution selection. Slide 5, please. And of course, that means you also need to think carefully about what to ask. Number one question being workflow fit, and what requirements are important to you and your firm and your lawyers. So this is a snapshot of some of the questions to ask when you're looking at this use case. The ability, of course, to reliably identify and normalize critical dates, the accuracy of classification and chronological sorting, the ability to handle large, messy document sets, chronologies that are easily updated as additional facts come to light, also explainability and auditability, and as well the ability to pull out key facts, not just facts about what has happened, but also how they affect the case or what they mean in the context of the case. On Legal Tech Hub, we will be publishing after the session a full analysis of this use case and the data. So look that up, and we will as well have guidance, more guidance on what to look for in these solutions. But for now, I want to hand us over for discussion, and perhaps to kick us off, wondering how important it is for all of you to have a point solution here that really digs deep and allows you to have that kind of central organizing system of record for litigation versus the ability to rapidly extract key facts. Are you seeing the need for both, or what is more useful here? So with that, Oz, I'll turn it back over to you for the discussion.
Thank you. And before we start the group discussion, we're going to stop the recording.